India and China are trying to turn a fragile thaw into something more permanent, and the timing could not be more important. Just weeks before Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to visit India, the two countries have held their 25th round of special representatives talks on their long-running boundary dispute. India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval met Chinese Foreign Minister Wang for talks focused on the border de-escalation, boundary demarcation and border management. But this was not just another round of border negotiations. It comes at a moment when India-China relations are slowly coming back from their worst crisis in years. And with the Chinese president expected in New Delhi for the BRICS summit on September 12 and 13, these talks are being watched for a bigger reason. Can India and China turn border peace into a broader political reset? Let's start with what India said after the talks. New Delhi said that Ajit Doval and Wang had a candid and constructive exchange and agreed to continue working towards a political settlement of the boundary question, keeping in mind the overall and long-term interest of both countries. Doval also made an important point. He said India and China are partners, not competitors, and that building a stable, predictable and forward-looking relationship between the two countries is absolutely important, not just for India and China, but also for Asia and the wider world. But there is a reason India is putting so much emphasis on the border issue, because India and China's relationship's biggest problem has always been the border. And after decades of relative peace, that relationship was badly shaken by the deadly clashes of 2020. 20 Indian soldiers and 4 Chinese soldiers were killed. The clashes triggered a prolonged military standoff and fundamentally changed the way New Delhi viewed its relationship with Beijing. It took years of negotiations before the two sides reached a disengagement agreement in October of 2024. Since then, there has been a gradual attempt to restore normalcy. And Doval's message at the latest talks was essentially this: the improvement in the wider relationship has happened because there is greater peace and tranquility along the border. In other words, for India, border stability is not a separate issue. It is the foundation on which everything else depends. But Beijing has its own message. China's Wang said that the boundary question needs to be placed in an appropriate position within the overall India-China relationship. And China also brought back a phrase that is particularly interesting: package settlement, because the language has not always been consistent when it comes to China. China had actually dropped the reference to a package settlement from its readout of the previous round of special representatives talks. Now it has brought the formulation back. The concept broadly points towards dealing with the boundary as a whole rather than simply resolving individual sections one at a time. Now, India has used similar language in the past, but in recent years, New Delhi has generally preferred to talk about a fair, reasonable and mutually acceptable settlement framework rather than repeatedly using China's preferred formulation of a package settlement. So while both sides are talking about a final political settlement, they are not necessarily describing the road to that settlement in exactly the same way. And that tells us something important. The thaw is real, but the differences haven't disappeared. Now, why is all of this happening just before Xi Jinping's possible India visit? Because Xi's return to India would itself be a major signal. It would be his first visit to India in 7 years. The last time he came was in 2019. Since then, the relationship has gone through the 2020 border crisis, years of military tension, and a significant deterioration in political trust. So if the Chinese president does arrive in New Delhi for the BRICS summit next month, the optics will be significant. But the real story will be what happens behind the photographs. Xi is expected to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and there could potentially be back-to-back Modi-Xi meetings, first at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Kyrgyzstan and then in New Delhi during the BRICS summit. Now that gives both leaders an opportunity to discuss the bigger relationship. And there is plenty to discuss: the border, trade and economic ties, regional security, and the larger question of how two major Asian powers, both competitors and neighbors, manage their relationship without allowing competition to turn into confrontation. China, meanwhile, is talking about the relationship in increasingly global terms. Wang Yi said that India-China relations have gone beyond the bilateral relationship and now have global and strategic significance. Beijing also invoked the idea of a dragon-elephant tango, its phrase for India and China working together as neighbors, friends, and mutually enabling partners. But here's the catch. For India, economic and diplomatic normalization cannot be completely separated from what happens along the border. The 2020 crisis changed that equation, and that is why New Delhi continues to stress peace and tranquility along the frontier. The latest talks, therefore, should not be read as a mere breakthrough on the boundary itself.